I think we have one of our guests is joining us right now. It's hard remotely to get together and talk, but we're trying our best here. So it sounds like we have Ryan Perez of COPAL who is here to talk. Hey, oh, and you've got your mask. That's wonderful. Uh, Thank you so much for being with us. So your organization tracks, advocates for our Latino community across the state. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the day's been so far from your perspective, and just some of your efforts and your organization's effort to make sure people are headed to the polls today?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for having me. COPAL is a recently formed a few years ago Latino civic engagement nonprofit. We probably have the largest Latino vote engagement program in the state. Um, I think today was really a positive thing, and I heard some of Secretary Simon's remarks. And same here, there was we prepared for the likelihood of voter intimidation, of other issues faced by Latino voters at the polling place. And we had 75 folks stationed across the state in
Hmm.
7 priority cities. And for the most part, there were very few incidents reported. A lot of it was, not a lot of long lines, which was really good. The early vote, I think, really helped with that. And for the most part, people felt really safe and comfortable voting and were attended to pretty quickly. So I have to say I'm very proud of how election day went today.
And I wondered too, along those lines, we've been hearing so much about young people turning out to vote, some of our youngest voters. What have you seen with the age demographics? Anything standing out to you there?
You know what we've really seen, and without giving you any statistics, the movement and the work we're doing right now has built by so many young volunteers, some of which who are not even eligible to vote, whether they're too young or they don't have citizenship. But we have just a huge flow of young people saying, this is the first time I'm ever getting involved in politics. I really see the need now to get involved in our elections. And so I'm really curious to see as the results come in, if the data reflects that high youth turnout that we seem to be seeing from conversations.
Yeah, and you mentioned people who are, DACA recipients, people who are not able to vote
Hmm.
themselves, taking it upon themselves to help with some of those efforts because they realize that it's going to impact their futures as well. And it sounds like COVID-19. Do you think that was something that you would think it would stand in the way of folks getting to the polls? But it sounds like there weren't a lot of issues. So I wonder, how do you feel like the pandemic has played in to this election cycle?
We have a really interesting, I think, two forces. One is that there's an amazing energy about getting involved in this election because of the various ways it's impacting people's lives in a way that I've never seen before, this interest in getting involved. But the barriers of this election are also probably the highest they've ever been because of the challenge of absentee voting. The amount of tools that are available online create specific language challenges for a lot of our community members. And so you kind of feel this push and pull. We cannot meet people in the community in the same way that we traditionally do because there's just a lot less in-person events, and that's one of the best way to reach new voters. And so uh, I've kind of been wondering how this balance is actually going to play out in practice, because people seem to have a high level of interest in overcoming those barriers. We talked to about 10 people just this morning who just walked by our office, said, "Hey, I heard about you guys on TV. Can you help me with my ballot application? Can you help me with whatever I need to get done?" And then we provided that service to them. And so, despite how high the level of hurdle is, people have been really trying to accomplish the vote this year.
Mhm. It sounds like we have our second guest, Joey Peters, reporter for Sahan Journal, with us. Hey, thanks for making it with us. Ibrahim, do you have some questions for Joey?
Yeah, Joe, it's good to see you. Are you at home or something?
I'm at home. Yeah, I had to call in.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, it's really great to see you. You've written a number of stories about on the impact that the summer riots had on the Latino community. Has this been a significant factor? This being this election a significant? I mean, these riots a significant factor in the decision making process of, who they vote for, whether they want to vote for Biden or Trump.
I would say that I've spoken to some people within the Latino community who definitely cited the defund the police efforts and the discussion on defund the police as a reason for their supporting Trump. But I'd say that this is a pretty small number of Latino voters I've talked with. And from sources and organizations, it sounds like a majority here in Minnesota are backing Biden, and they're citing issues like immigration reform, the virus and how it's impacting their community as some of their major factors going into this election.
Yeah, and I think this is for both of you. What's your hope for these communities, regardless of the outcome of this election?
Well, this election for a lot of people we work with is an election based on self-defense. And so no matter what candidate they're voting for, they're doing it to protect something, for the most part, is what we hear on the ground. And I want to move, our community from a position of just defending what we have to really envisioning what a better future looks like. Really envisioning, what are the things you're struggling to make on the day-to-day, whether it's healthcare access, good education for your kids, and envision what does that, ideal future look like for you. And so a lot of people we hear are frustrated with the way candidates aren't addressing some of these really core needs. And yeah, I think those policy conversations will hopefully be able to happen into 2021.
Yeah, and Ryan, I just wanted to follow up because I think we have some time. We can come back to these hope questions. I think you were talking about early on, the Latino communities. I mean, I know that with other communities as well, when elections are happening, politicians would just come in and talk about what they're going to do for them. And then when elections are done, then you will never see them. I mean, that's the complaints that I've seen throughout my reporting career. Is that the same for the Latino community? Are folks, tired of politicians coming to them and then not seeing them again? And what are you and other folks doing about that?
Well, I think a key factor is that there is no, I often talk about Latino communities with an S because there's so many different groups that, have different interests and different policy proposals, for example, that they're pushing. And an example is that with car titles, there is some legislation offered by the Democrats that used the matricula consular, which is the Mexican ID, in order to allow people who are undocumented, who have the matricula as their document, to be able to get the car title. That was an issue that helped the Mexican community, but left out undocumented Salvadorans, other members of Central and South American countries who did not have that type of ID. And I bring up this example because in that way, the Democrats claimed to show up, but showed up in a way that missed huge swaths of the community and didn't address a lot of basic needs. And so that is to say that a lot of times parties will show up, claim that they're ready to support the community, do some things that are very, piecemeal, that don't get at a lot of the core issues facing communities, and then they do leave until the next election to make new promises. And so what is important with us when I speak to our community members that are interested in becoming leaders and organizers is that there's constant pressure on elected officials to continue to make change.
Yeah, and Joey, I wanted to ask you this very quickly too. A couple of years ago, I did a story on, covering a story about the Latino communities and how that was 2016. And then I met a father and his 16-year-old daughter getting people out to vote. So the 16-year-old, of course, can't vote. And then I asked the father why he was doing this, and he couldn't vote because he was undocumented. But here we have two people who can't vote, but at the same time doing this work, making sure people are able to vote. Have you seen, and of course that's not a unique to this one father and daughter. Have you seen similar things where people who are not eligible to vote are actually trying to do something so that they're able to get what they want to get in, to either stay in this country or get their programs going?
A lot of the people that I've spoken with at organizations like COPAL or Unidos Minnesota, they might be DACA or some might be undocumented and not able to vote themselves, but they're kind of at the forefront of getting their communities out to vote. So I definitely see a lot of that. And I just think in general, this is a rapidly growing community in Minneapolis, and Pew Research Center is estimating this year 127,000 Latinos of voting age in Minnesota. So yeah, I hope to see that the political participation continues to grow.
Ryan, I know
Ryan.
that this summer a lot of Latino businesses were impacted by unrest following the killing of George Floyd on Lake Street. Do you have any updates for how are people doing in terms of some of those rebuilding efforts? Just generally speaking, what are you hearing?
Yeah, that's it's a point of a lot of conversation, because what a lot of the national conversations about uprising, protest, and destruction kind of miss is that a lot of the damage hit Lake Street, which is historically the heart of the Latino community in Minnesota, but also Black and Brown communities have a lot of new businesses based around Lake Street, and so what we're hit is a lot of families who are starting businesses that were their entryway into the middle class, or to grow their communities and improve their communities. And so there, of course, was a lot of initial negative reaction to that. But what's key, and the conversations we've continued to have, is to focus on the fact that what we all want is safety. And when we talk about it at COPAL, we've been saying, well, as a business owner, you're looking for safety. And so are a lot of undocumented Latinos who are victims of police oftentimes, other darker skinned Latinos who are often victims of police, and Afro-Latinos, and also other Black and African-American members of our community. So the interest in safety is the same. And what has that's been missed in a lot of the rhetoric around this conversation. And so I think in Minnesota, we have unique demographic situation. Most of the Latinos here are Mexican. Most that can vote are a second generation. And so the political dynamic here is a lot different than other states. But I mean, this election, I think, will be a tell about how Latinos in Minnesota have decided to vote based on those understandings.
Thank you for that update. And Joey, did you want to answer the question about hopes for the future? We're trying to focus on the future, and we wondered if we should ask journalists what their hopes are, and we don't want to get into opinions, but I think journalists can have hopes too. So I wondered, there has been a lot of divisive rhetoric and things like that this year, maybe more than in past years. What are you hoping for after the election?
Well, yeah, maybe less of that. But also, when you look at numbers provided for previous elections, you see the number of voting age population in Latinos going up. And some would suggest that you've seen voter turnout, even though the Latino vote in Minnesota, it looks historically, has been one of the lower ones.
Hmm.
Some of these numbers suggest the voter turnout increasing. So I think we all would probably like to see more political participation, or that trend continuing in Minnesota.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your time. Again, I'm telling everybody, take care of yourselves in the coming days.